Hello! Today in my kitchen we will be cooking a wacky cake. This recipe is interesting and fun because it is a one-pan recipe made for a 7x7 pan, although today I will be using a mixing bowl because I only have two 8x8 pans that are too shallow to do all the mixing in. However, don't let that stop you from using only one pan, which is great for a quick cleanup. So starting off, we are going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, we are going to sift all of our dry ingredients together, starting with 1.5 cups of flour. Sifting is really important because it makes the flour much lighter and easier to mix into the other ingredients and eliminates clumps, making a much smoother batter. Next, we sifted 1 cup of granulated sugar into the bowl. We will be sifting all of our dry ingredients today for the same reason as with the flour. Now we sift 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Cocoa powder comes from the cocoa bean. It is the powder left after removing the cocoa butter. Fun fact, 1.5 tablespoons of cocoa powder contains about 30 milligrams of caffeine, so our cake has around 60 milligrams of caffeine in it, equivalent to 2/3 of a cup of coffee. Next, we sifted in 1 teaspoon of baking soda, which needs an added base to react with it. In this case, it would be the vinegar and the butter that we will add later. And then we sifted in 1 teaspoon of baking powder, which contains both an acid in the form of solid crystals as well as a base. And our last dry ingredient is 1/4 teaspoon of salt, which we sifted in. Once we have all of our dry ingredients together, we can use a spoon to create 3 different wells that we will add our wet ingredients to. It's important to combine them separately in order for optimal mixing. Next, we added 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract into one of the wells. And then we add 1 teaspoon of vinegar to the wells, which is acting as a base for the baking soda to react to. The vinegar makes the batter more acidic and causes the proteins in the flour to set while the cake bakes, making it lighter and more fluffy. Next, we added 5 tablespoons of melted butter into the 3rd well. And finally, a layer of 1 cup of warm water over the top of all of the ingredients. The next step is that we mix the batter well, but making sure to stop once all the ingredients are combined. Overmixing your batter will affect the gluten development in the flour, and it can cause the cake to come out dense and chewy rather than light and fluffy. Mixed batter should appear like this, with a smooth consistency and no air pockets. The next step is to pour our batter into the cake pans if you used a mixing bowl like I did. And the cool thing about this recipe is that because of the ingredients, you don't need to put any grease in the pan, whereas you typically would with other recipes. Now our cakes are ready to go into the oven. Now that our oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, we're ready to put our cakes in. The recipe says that you should use a cookie sheet, like the one there, and put the cakes on top of the cookie sheet. Now we can let our cakes bake for 30 minutes and then check on them. While the cakes are in the oven, this is the perfect time to get started on the icing. So we start with 2 cups of confectioner sugar and 1/4 of a cup of butter, and we combine these ingredients in a medium-sized mixing bowl. Next, you stir the ingredients vigorously so that they form a smooth consistency. Once the sugar and butter is mixed well, we will add 1 tablespoon of milk at a time to loosen the mixture, mixing in between adding so that we don't over-add and lose the correct consistency. I started off using a whisk, but realized quickly it was not the optimal tool for mixing these ingredients, so I switched to a spatula instead. Once your icing is mixed well, it should be not too liquidy but also not too solid. I found that when I held it upside down with my spoon and it slowly dripped down, that was the right consistency. Now that our icing is finished and it has been 30 minutes, we can go get our cakes out of the oven. A tip for those at home: if you dip a toothpick into your cake and it comes out clean, that means the cake is ready. If it comes out with clumps of cake attached, it is not yet fully set internally and needs more time. For us, these cakes are done. The next step is to take the cakes out of the oven. I let them sit in their pans to cool down for a few minutes before transferring them to a cooling rack to let them cool further. As I was removing the cakes from their pans, the first cake came out very easily. However, with the following cake, a big chunk of it got stuck to the pan, but I just gently scraped it out and put it back in place. This happened because I did not let the cakes cool for long enough, and so the heat of the pan caused it to stick instead of stay on with the cake. Now that it's been about 15 minutes, our cake is cooled down and ready to ice. While I am icing the cake, I just wanted to touch upon the science behind baking a cake. It is divided into 3 stages: expansion, setting, and then browning. Expansion is when the active ingredients, in this case the baking powder and baking soda, expand the batter, the chemical leavening process which produces carbon dioxide. Next, during the setting stage, the batter is set into shape by the heat of the oven, the starch granules absorbing the water and gelating. Finally, in the browning stage, the batter is completely solidified. In any typical non-chocolate cake, you can see that the cake is physically browned. However, this is less apparent in my chocolate cake due to the color. However, this is where the toothpick method comes in handy to see that your cake is done. Finally, our wacky cake is finished, a great tasting and easy recipe. Thank you, bye!